Herbert Hoover believed that the total collapse of most European economies after World War I led to the Depression in the U.S. One thing that led to the collapse of some European economies was the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles was a treaty to keep peace after World War I. It was made by Woodrow Wilson from the United States, David Lloyd George from Britain, and George Clemenceau from France. Its goal was to make Germany pay for the damage they did during the war. It destroyed the German economy, which caused instability in smaller European nations. Hoover claims in his memoir that the Treaty of Versailles, revolutions, unbalanced budgets, hugely increased armaments, which is a military or naval force, inflation, and the gigantic overproduction of rubber, coffee, and other commodities were all causes. Economic instability in the United States led to political instability in other parts of the world. The first thing that happened was political chaos leading to the rise of dictators in countries such as Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. This was due to the severe drop in export income. The drop in economy frightened the citizens and they would vote for a strong leader to fix it. These leaders would often turn into dictators. The second thing that led to political instability in other parts of the world is fascism and militarism. Fascism is a political movement that emphasizes extreme nationalism and the supremacy of a nation and its leader. Militarism is the belief that a government should have a strong military. In Germany, Hitler and the Nazis promised to restore the country's economy and military. He promised to do this by creating civil order, restore prosperity, eliminate the influence of Jewish financiers, and make the country a world power. In Italy, fascism rose under Mussolini. Mussolini made a political party called a fasci. Mussolini soon made any party illegal except for the fasci. In Japan, the military seized the government in the 1930s by assassinating and intimidating politicians, bureaucrats, and service leaders. The third thing that led to political chaos in other parts of the world is totalitarian communism. This is when the government attempts to control all aspects of a citizen's life. Joseph Stalin used the Great Depression to expand his power in the Soviet Union. He did this through his first 5-year plan, which called for industrialization and the collection of small peasant farmers under government control. The fourth thing that led to political chaos is welfare capitalism. This happened in Canada, Great Britain, and France. It is when the government is responsible for providing a fair distribution of wealth and power and security in the case of bankruptcies and unemployment. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff. Senator Reed Smoot of Utah and Representative Willis Hawley of Oregon sponsored a tariff bill that was meant to raise the tariff on foreign agricultural products. This tariff would be beneficial to the struggling farmers because it would make the cost of foreign goods increase, and therefore Americans would be forced to buy only American products. As the bill was being passed through Congress, other lawmakers tried to help their constituents by also raising the tariff in their industry. This happened in industries like manufacturing and mining. By the time the bill was passed by Congress, there was 890 tariffs on all different types of items. This raised the tariff from 38.5% to almost 60%. Over 1,000 American economists urged President Herbert Hoover not to sign the bill. They feared that all these tariffs would end up hurting the Americans because other countries would be angry and retaliate with tariffs of their own. This would make American goods more expensive. Hoover ignored the American economists and signed the bill anyway. It is the second highest tariff in United States history. This is a picture of Willis C. Hawley on the left and Reed Smoot on the right. Retaliation from other countries due to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act came fast. Countries like Spain, Mexico, and Canada raised tariff on American goods. This really hurt farmers. For example, before the tariffs, Americans sold over 12 million eggs to Canada per year, and now because of the tariff, they sold only around 170,000 a year. Other industries' exports like automobiles, iron, and steel dropped 80%. The United States lost hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sales. The second thing that happened is major foreign policy consequence. For example, Cuba's economy was crushed by the tariff made on sugar. They relied heavily on their sugar sales. Revolutionaries helped overthrow their U.S.-friendly government. They replaced it with one that had more independence from the United States. This means that they were no longer relying on only the U.S. for their sugar sales. The third reaction to the Smoot-Hawley tariff is protectionist policies. This is a restriction on international trade to benefit a country's economy. Countries had protectionist policies not only on the United States but other countries too. This reduced the amount of international trade, which deepened the Depression even more. This is a picture of American protests after the Smoot-Hawley tariff is passed. When the Great Depression hit, Hoover's Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon urged him to liquidate labor, liquidate stocks, liquidate the farmers, and liquidate real estate. This would purge the rottenness out of the system and make certain that people would work harder. Hoover ignored Andrew Mellon and made his own version of the New Deal. This New Deal prevented the market from clearing. The New Deal resulted in the longest unemployment period in all of United States history. Around 13 million people were unemployed at this time. Andrew Mellon lost popularity after the stock market crash and stepped down from his position as Treasury Secretary. And this is a picture of Andrew Mellon. Hoover's first response to the Great Depression was to institute a moratorium on intergovernmental debt payments on June 20, 1931. This means that for 1 year, there was a stop on payments of German and inter-Allied war debts coming from World War I. There were some negative reactions from United States citizens in France. They thought that it was only fair that Germany and their allies pay back every penny that they owed immediately. This moratorium, which became known as Hoover's moratorium, would promote economic stability worldwide. By July 6, all 15 nations involved accepted this proposal. The moratorium did little to help, and before the year was over, a meeting was held at the Lausanne Conference for a more permanent solution. No agreement ended up being made at this conference. The second thing that happened is central bankers in Europe and America refused to get rid of their gold standard. This would let the governments devalue their currency and put needed money into their economies. Britain did get rid of their gold standard in 1931, but the United States did not follow them, and because of this, economies around the world got even worse. The third reaction to the Great Depression is the Federal Reserve raising the discount rate. The discount rate is the rate of interest that is applied to future cash flows of an investment to calculate its present value. The Federal Reserve was concerned about speculation in the stock market. They raised discount rates from 3.5% to 5%. They did this because the price paid for a product or service at the time of the transaction was falling. It was then made into a discount rate of 6% by 1929. The rate started to lower to 1.5% in June 1931, but the central bank then raised them to 3.5% in November of 1931. The fourth thing that Hoover did was using the powers of the government to cushion situations. He did this by first persuading industrialists to agree to maintain wage rates at a conference in Washington, D.C. He assured business owners they had nothing to worry about. Utility companies and railroad executives elicited promises for billions of dollars in new construction projects. Labor leaders promised to stop increasing wages, and workers continued the labor. Hoover also used the powers of the government to get the Federal Farm Board to support agricultural production. Hoover gave the Farm Board a $500 million budget to loan money to farmers, and hopefully this would control production and bring more crops to the market. The board failed to help. Hoover used the power of the government to get congressional approval for $140 million in new public works. Public works are construction projects that are sponsored and carried out by a government administration to increase the quality of life for a citizen. This can include schools, hospitals, dams, and bridges. The public works projects during this time were the Golden Gate Bridge, the Hoover Dam, and the first freeway. Hoover nearly doubled federal public works expenditures during 1929 to 1931, but it wasn't enough. Hoover didn't allow the federal government to take over the situation completely. He relied on private businesses and state and local governments to stimulate the economy. He focused mainly on volunteerism to raise money, and some saw this as uncaring to American citizens.